coming. Thank you for that. So is there anybody who else that wants to give a quick feedback, right? Quick feedback. All right, so so far, if I could be permitted to quickly give a recap, right? I'll just say that for those who get to listen to this much later, right? What we're talking about is the leadership communication advantage, why sound strategy dies in the gap between decision and, of course, the delivery. All right. So we've talked about a bit, right? One of the things we've talked about is the fact that we don't fail at the level of decision making. We fail because the decisions that needs to be made do not land properly, right? We talked about that. Then we showed the cost, right? Talked about the fact that 67% of all the strategies fail because of poor execution, and also mentioned the fact that 71% of leaders admit that they fail to communicate priorities or ideas properly. And then we talked about the fact that 95% of employees do not understand their company's strategy. So we've connected the dots, right, between the poor execution, all right, and a lack of understanding of the strategy. In the middle here, we have communication. Poor communication is the culprit, all right? Very quickly. We've also mentioned quite a bit that between the point where we make those decisions in our boardrooms and when it gets to, the team, the army of executors, the team in the middle, most of the time, will not communicate properly. And sometimes it's not because they don't understand. So there's a possibility of understanding what was said, but the absence of the same capacity to deliver that which was said with the same enthusiasm, with the same fire, with the same heart, with the same energy, that can be a problem. Or better still, another dimension may be that the person didn't get proper understanding and was afraid to ask for clarity. That itself allows for poor communication to the execution team. So that, again, we talked about. And then we began to share on the case study of Nokia. Yeah, very powerful for us to remind ourselves. Our prayers that we will not have companies that fail at this level. We will not have companies that fail at this level, but we can learn from companies that have failed at that level. All right, very important, very important. So, so for what is worth, I think that we have come to a very important part of our conversation while sharing on the Nokia story, right? Painfully, when a company in 2007 controls 51% of the entire globe's market share in its industry, and then in just 6 years drops its 51% influence and relevance and market share to just 3%. We know that that's a dangerous place to be. And ultimately, they sold their company that was worth hundreds of millions. They sold it for just 7.2 billion to Microsoft, all right, ultimately. And we look at this case study and ask ourselves, so what really happened? Because this collapse was terrible. All right. So in terms of recapping what we've done so far, we're now talking about what actually happened. And one of the things we have seen so far is that we say, based on the the studies that was carried out on Nokia as to how and why this company collapsed, we said that the company was gripped by fear. Who? The people at the bottom were gripped by fear. Because there was a culture of every time you come with sort of a bad news, right? You get fired. You get fired for just telling the truth. So it seems that the people at the top just wanted to hear what they needed to hear. And so for that reason, a lot of people who knew the truth kept the truth to themselves. And when they kept the truth to themselves, the people at the top didn't have access to correct conversation, correct data, correct, and that itself was a communication gap that the top allowed to build, and painfully. So say middle managers had learned something that through experience, anyone carrying bad news to the top, all right, ended up losing their career at Nokia. Okay. So the truth stayed where it was safe, and leadership kept building on a story that the market had already stopped agreeing with, And so I began to share also the, how that is related to the story of BlackBerry, and how at the peak of BlackBerry refused to innovate, even though certain people within the system agreed with Steve Jobs, who had just announced to the world that their own phones, the Apple phones, was going to be moving out of buttons and moving into a buttonless phone that like the ones we currently use. All right. So Steve Jobs innovated, but these people were too obsessed with their BlackBerry buttons. For those of us who still remember BlackBerry, you know what I'm talking about. And what was the response to the questions asked by the investors? The founder of BlackBerry simply said, "Who needs a phone without buttons? Who needs a phone without buttons? Who needs a phone without buttons?" That was scary, right? That was scary and painful. It didn't allow them innovate. All right, they didn't innovate because they were not open to communication. And then we moved on to the Kodak story, how it is so related. The dominance between 1975 and 2012 was so massive. The fact that Kodak engineer created the first digital camera is even something special to behold. In other words, within the Kodak's laboratories, they had the capacity to innovate and prepare for the future. However, the Kodak founders and owners were still okay with the films, all right? Because the market was still doing well. They couldn't innovate for the future. And the more they heard the truth, the more they said, no, we don't want that truth. Let's stay to what we're used to, right? What we're used to. So the company that invented digital photography filed for bankruptcy in 2012. Who does that? Undone by the very technology that had been sitting on its own, all right, on its own shelf for almost 40 years. So basically speaking, people took that technology, evolved with it, while Kodak, that invented that technology, did not run with it. They refused to take their own truth. They refused to allow their own truth. So back to the Kodak, the Nokia case study. So as we round up with that case study, I'd like to remind you that Nokia for 6 years, all right, lost nearly 250 billion in value. At the time, it was just about 250 billion in value, all right? Eventually sold for 7.2 billion to Microsoft. Crazy, right? One truth nobody said out loud. So they didn't need a better strategy. The company didn't. They needed someone impossible to be misunderstood. And just maybe the people who knew what to be said just were not communicated. And again, we see that in all the three stories we've shared, whether it's the BlackBerry, whether it's Kodak, or in Nokia, a similar pattern. And I've shared my own personal experiences painfully. I've shared how I've been in organizations where people stopped communicating their innovative ideas. Why? A particular one I remember very well, right? The guy eventually resigned and left the company. But before he did, he had told me that he cannot speak his ideas anymore because the head of department will come into the meeting, take the ideas, and go and communicate them in the management meeting as his own ideas, right? And one of those ideas eventually got executed by the management team, and they honored the um, head of department openly for originating the idea. And when that meeting was being held, those who knew where the idea came from were looking at the guy who generated the idea, and they felt bad, right? This head of department had lost control of his team. They didn't trust him anymore. In the meetings, people stopped talking, not just the person who gave the idea, but people just stopped speaking. It was now the environment that used to be quite a buzzing room with a lot of people with innovative ideas. It just went silent, right? It became like a graveyard. And I said that this is me recapping what I've experienced personally. And I said really that is the story of many organizations that have lost great talents because somebody wanted to be a superstar in the eyes of management. All right. I said, what is wrong with coming to the management team, even if you will not call the name of the person who generated it? That Shade said this in my department. Why not say, myself and my team have come up with this. This is what our department, not I. All right. In that way, you've created an inclusive environment that has allowed for ideas to thrive very properly. All right. I've given a lot of thoughts around this, and I think one of the things I was even sharing was let me end with this one, a personal experience from 3 years ago. I was facilitating a media workforce training, all right, that is closely related to what we just had right now. This year we had a virtual one, media reset, and people could join from across the globe, right? And so we had a situation where in that meeting, while I was still speaking, somebody lifted his hand and he said, what if you have a management that is not open to ideas? You are charging us to go back and be useful to our organizations and give our best, for the second half. So what if you have a management that doesn't want to listen, all right? I think my response is very, very critical. I need to respond to this. However, what he said that day was that he had gone to his manager, and the manager had told him to go back to his workstation, that he was not paid to come and be bringing ideas to the organization. He said, and I quote, he said, go do what we are paid to do, and not paid to give us ideas. All right, we have enough on our plates. All right. And this guy went back to his seat feeling very bad because he felt that his idea could save the organization some money. And so he stopped talking. Now he was getting ready to resign from that organization when he came for the media workforce retreat. This was in Alausa in Lagos. And, that day, God gave me a certain wisdom that he had to go implement. As I listened to him, what I did was I said to him, well, you've given us your part of the story. I said, I don't know any organization that does not want the best for its organization. So there's something missing here. There's something missing here. I said to him, there's what to be said and there's how to say it. So maybe you had a good idea, but you did not say it well. The communication was not proper. You did not exercise your capacity to deliver your value in the right packaging. I said, that is my own thoughts. And I said, one reason why you have to understand why this is important is because your manager is not here. So we can't speak to your manager. If we speak about your manager, it will be gossip in this particular forum. He's not here to defend himself, to tell us why he said what he said. Because no organization really, especially if you are a co-owner of the organization, all right, you're a shareholder of the organization. No one wants to destroy an organization by itself. So I said, my dear friend, you don't have control over what your manager will do or say, but you have control over yourself. So when you get back to your office, this is what you should do. All right? Take this very idea or more that you have to speak about, and please go back and communicate them properly. I said, take a one-pager write-up. Write your organization, your department, your name, and all of that, and write your idea. Now communicate the value which this idea will bring. Don't let it be more than one page. Don't say too much. Just communicate the value. But make sure your name is very clearly there. And now email it to your MD so that you don't go to him and go and start talking about it. I said, it might be that your boss even just wants you to focus on your job and not use your job to, your work period to come and be chit-chatting. Maybe that is even possible. And instead of having to thank you, for instance, and do the needful, he himself has a communication problem. So he didn't know how to tell you how to do what you are supposed to do properly. He's not communicating. So there's a communication gap both places. Let me fast forward to the outcome of this, because the feedback was almost immediate. Now, he had gone back a few months later, he chatted me up. And then he said, that idea worked. I said, how do you mean? So he said that on one of those management meetings, the boss just openly announced, called his name out, and told him to stand up. And then told him that he received the email and thanked him for it because it's really very critical. And said to the entire team that, please, this is how we really want to. I'm not paying you for this right now, but I'm openly acknowledging what you did. This guy didn't resign again. In fact, he found a better way to communicate. Don't forget, it's not what you say, how you say it. And communication is about both of them. It's about the idea and it's about the capacity to convey it. And that's why we're having this discussion. We're talking about the leadership communication advantage, right? Why ideas fail between the point of discussing it at the boardroom and the point of delivery or execution at the team level. All right? The missing gap right there from the data we saw up there, communication. All right? So this is where we summarize today, so that we can stop here. Clarity, influence, and executive presence. Those are the three things I want to talk about. So we'll go a little deeper than what we've spoken about so far. So let me just hit on these three things and then we'll summarize and close today. We can interact. I hope this has been useful to us so far. So the hidden failure, all right, is leaders speak in conclusions, not in parts. Not in a part anyone else can actually walk, right? The people in the room nod, then leave the environment quietly, interpret what they think he meant or she meant, right? That is a certain dimension that happens in our communication, really. All right. Yeah. Thank you for the feedback, Mr. Frederick. Yeah. So this is a case study, and this is something that said. Imagine I, as a team lead, comes to my team and I communicate without communicating. I share the overall picture without actionable plan, or not allowing the team to own what is being said and discussing how we execute the plan. Communication has not been done. Yes, I did a vision casting, but not everybody receives at the same level. Some people need to be told what to do. Some people need to be part of the process. In fact, one of the things that we know in terms of leadership and how teams, high-performing teams execute is the fact that when you bring an idea to a team, you put it on the board or project it on your projector in your conference room. You now ask the question of how can we get this done? Now you conceive that idea, but you've asked the question, how can we achieve this? You've moved the idea from your mind, from your head, and you have moved it to the point where everybody can begin to deliver on the execution. At that point, what you're doing is not even just to create strategy, it's to bring everybody to own it. At that point, if all the executive members are involved in the crafting of the execution, in fact, you've done well. So what's wrong with throwing the big idea to the screen and then you saying, let's think about this? Even if we can't finish the brainstorming process now. Let's come and finish it tomorrow. Go and think about it. Come back with how we can get it done. You are indirectly saying, let's own this together, right? An executive team that co-own an idea will ultimately go back with the same energy and deliver much better than you just coming to just say, this is what we're going to do. Let's run with it. So there's no clarity. And that is quite dangerous in its own way, right? In its own way. So before you speaking about the tool that we can use, you need to finish the sentence for yourself. The one thing I need them to do differently by Friday is, you state it out clearly, right? Now, the thing is, if you cannot finish this statement, if you cannot be clear enough as to what should be done, how it should be done, as a matter of fact, how it should be done, so there's what should be done, there's how it should be done, right? Then we add a little dimension, which is about motive and the inspiration, and that's the why. Why it should be done. So you go from the what to the how to the why. All right. If you cannot clearly clarify it by yourself as the senior executive, then you have a problem with clarity already. You have a problem with clarity already. Why this is important is, what if you began to ask everybody to speak about an idea that you have? But just like the executive I talked about earlier, who generates 95% of his entire ideas in his organization, right? If your people don't have a culture of generating ideas, the ideation stage of that idea will suffer. All right. So it's important again for you to finish that idea and bring it to the table, to the room. Now, in terms of brainstorming, everything that is added to an idea improves it, even a very unhealthy suggestion. I've been there before, where a bad idea that everybody laughed at became a certain source of inspiration to help enable the original idea. I've been in such meetings before. All right. I've been in such rooms before. So I need you to understand how important this is. Number 2 is influence. And influence is leadership. Influence is leadership. And guess what? Everybody has leadership. Has influence rather. A gateman has influence over someone. In fact, there's influence. And what is influence? The capacity to, inspire you to do something that you didn't even plan to do. All right. And in our, I'm tempted to go back again to our mid-year resets. Now, please, those of us who will listen to this ultimately, I recommend that you go and find a way to, get the link for this mid-year resets. Between now and the end of July, I beg you, I plead with you, and I'm on my knees actually pleading with you. Look for the replay and listen to it. Amazing, all right, amazing. 3 recordings and 5 models all put together, right? All put together. Great one. So we talked about influence and the capacity to lead upwards. In other words, lead your boss, right? So the hidden failure here is, right? A leader mistakes authority for agreements. The fact that you have authority over a team, it means that everybody agrees with what you say. Now, a room can nod at everything you say and still walk out of that planning to do exactly what it was not already, do what it was already doing. In other words, nothing changes, right? Again, we've talked about why that is so. So the fact that you're the head of departments and you have not allowed people to own the idea or the thoughts that you have taken time to process over the weekend, over the weeks, and you're ultimately communicating it to the team. But you're not giving everybody to simmer it down, to own it, to be part of the brainstorming session, to be part of cooking the idea, right? There's no ownership. You just say, this is what we're going to be doing next week. Okay, yes, sir. All right. But how we're going to be doing it is not being communicated. So that is a problem itself. When you exercise your influence and authority without allowing people to really come into that influence by way of connecting with it or your ideas from their own level. So these are 2 here, right? Influence is the end in the room before the decision is announced. in the small conversations that build real buy-in. See that now? Not defended afterward in a memo nobody needs. Yeah. So great leaders even know that even after such conversations have been held in the boardroom, you still go on to have a lot of informal conversations around that. Right? I know this is not a leadership discussion, but one of the things that I've learned over time, I first came across it in John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, amazing leadership book, right? It's called The Law of the Buy-In. And I said certain stories there just rising in my heart right now, but I don't want us to waste time because we need to close now. All right. So one of the things he said was, well, um, basically, it says you don't ask for the hand until you have touched the heart, right? He gave a story of how, as a young clergy, he was posted to a certain city, a community where he was now heading the church there. And then all of a sudden, he comes into a meeting one day and announces to the entire people, this is what we're going to be doing. He thought people would be excited and realized there was no energy, no excitement. Unknown to him, there were some two major principalities and power, I'm calling them that, who sits in the front. And if they don't nod them head to say yes, everybody else will not. All right? He did not know. So he just found out later on that these guys came to him and were unhappy and talked about the fact that this thing you want to do, why is it like that? So anyway, indirectly, he was able to find out true influence. He was the positional influence, but the true influence in that organization were these two men that had been there over time. He was new to the environment. People were not loyal to him yet, but these two people who had been here, people are loyal to him. So what he now learned was this. Instead of trying to prove his authority, he went to the houses of each of these men, sat with them, brought them gifts, allowed them to buy into the vision that he was going to communicate. They were all excited about it. And he asked them, each of them, will you be kind enough to please share, with some of the people around? So in other words, some conversations has already been happening. These people who had more influence had already gone to sow seeds. By the time he came back about 7 days later and stood to communicate that same thing, he was looking at the men, and the men were nodding their heads. Everybody else began to nod their heads. When these two men clapped, everybody else clapped. They owned the thing together, and boom. He said from that day, his leadership capacity changed. He began to understand that there is the person who has influence and there's the one who has title. There's a difference. I've learned it. I've learned it a lot, a lot. I'm telling you, you can be a new branch manager instead of trying to fight people who are there. Look for the people who have influence, and you can grow with such people. All right. I don't know who needed to hear that. Let's end with the last one. All right. And this is a very, very, very important one. And please don't get me wrong. Clarity, delivering on your message, on your messaging, by way of delivering your idea, is very clear, very important. Being able to wield leadership and influence and knowing how to leverage on that influence is very powerful. But you see, those two things also come in the form of the person who is carrying that. All right, the executive presence that is required to deliver that. And this is quite important. There's something called an executive voice. There's something called an executive presence. Don't forget, again, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. So let's come to the hidden truth here, right? Or the hidden failure, rather. Presence collapses under pressure, exactly at the moment it is needed most. The tone you take in the hardest 5 minutes become the story people tell about you afterwards. All right. So imagine the difficulty in trying to communicate. All right. Interestingly, one of the easiest places to develop leadership competence and capacity is in a non-profit environment. where people don't say yes, sir, to you because you pay their salaries, but people follow you, follow your leadership, submit to your influence because they want to, they choose to, because of who you are, right? There's a difference. And that's why corporate America forced all its senior executives to go and join volunteer organizations, all right? Wall Street at a particular time found out that a lot of his executives had no soul and forced his executives to go and become part of Red Cross and volunteer organizations around the US, and so that they could learn how to build leadership competence that was not tied to the revenue they were earning. All right. And I'm saying this because when people disagree with you at that level, I've been there before. Well, all of a sudden, I lost influence over the team I was leading. And, I felt I had some influence, and boy, everything had gone south. It was not a good place to be. I realized at that point later on that I needed to grow. So it is so key. All right. The calmest voice in a tense room is remembered as the one who was in control. Whether or not that was true in the moment, presence is a discipline, not a mood. And so I'm just going to say this is what we have on the screen, but I'm just going to say this: how you carry yourself, how you respond to things, the courage, the confidence. And please, I'm not talking about charisma, because there are some introverted people who have learned executive presence. Without shouting, they communicate with power, with dignity. They communicate well. All right. I have a number of mentors like that in my life. All right. You see them in their private moments, they're very gentle people. But when they enter into the room, they wield the kind of influence that is massive. All right. And so I want to leave it at that. This is so key. All right. I want to close this conversation with this. All right. But before we do that, let me open the floor to any input, responses, or questions. I'm just going to take about 2 or 3, and then we can begin to call it a day. I hope that is okay. So I'll appreciate it if I can get 1 or 2 persons, and you know what to do, right? You can raise your hand, you can speak up. Has this been useful to you? Has this been useful to you? If you know you're in a place that you can talk, please type your question and we'll respond, or type your response and we'll respond. Now, I said something at the beginning of this training, and I'm going to echo it again. It is a taboo to sit through a meeting and your mouth is quiet all through, especially when it is a time like this, when the team leader has asked, is there anything to be said? This is a good time to practice it. All right. You cannot be sitting in a communications meeting and you don't have anything to say. I said, if you don't have a question and you don't have anything to say, the least you can do is to re-echo what has been said. All right. Now, this is a good time to practice it. I'm going to keep quiet now and let me see what happens next. So let's do this quickly.
Good afternoon. I'm raising my hand.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, please. Thank you for raising your hand. Sorry, I didn't see that. Okay, so I can see Mr. Frederick, I can see Mr. Victor, and I can see, is that Naha?
Yes, sir.
That's your name, right? All right.
That is the company brand. Now I agree. I introduced myself in the chat box at the beginning.
Okay, what's the name, please?
Babatunde Ayenitaju.
Beautiful. Where are you joining us from, sir, please?
From Lagos.
Beautiful. All right, go ahead. Thank you.
We were together at the CEO Summit last year.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for joining us, Ben. And we didn't see you this year. You missed this year.
Yes, we had a chat around that. We had a discussion together now via WhatsApp.
Okay.
And
anyway,
we're already planning for that next year.
Beautiful. Let me leave it at that. All right. Thank you so much for joining this call today. All right. So please go ahead, sir.
Okay. since you've given the rule as well, to re-echo what you said. Okay, all right, and the lighter mood. So thank you so much, Mr. Rume. Amazing session indeed, and I've learned a lot, and I'm still learning. And one outstanding point for me uh, is actually from the case study of Nokia. Indeed, very, very it's painful, but it's become a lesson for us so that people like us won't repeat the same mistake. In my business in now Agric, now Global and Agri-Allied Company Limited, we are an agribusiness development company here in Nigeria. Let me leave it at that. So, by God's grace, I happen to be the CEO, the co-founder, and the CEO. Then I have the COO. Actually, at some point, I try to put a structure that the farm workers and sometimes also our contract staff, they should communicate to the COO that he might get the message across to me. Probably because of I have things I'm handling, so there are things that has to do with his office in that sense. But along the line, also I realized that sometimes some of these people just want to communicate with me. So they just want to communicate, especially at the moment, like the farm supervisor. So sometimes I tried, have you spoken to the COO about it? Maybe that is the area I personally have to improve on. That, okay, even while you are trying to speak to me, have you spoken to the CEO about it? What did they say? I think that's one of the areas I need to work on. But much more also in addition, I'm trying to consciously and intentionally from this lesson now be available to hear them. That's for me now. That come what may, I should try to be available to hear them. Since it looks as if they feel more comfortable to speak to me and to hear from me on certain decisions or tell me certain things happening. So I'm getting to learn that from this session today. As much I'm busy with some other things, be available to listen to them. Thank you so much, Minister.
No, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Please, I would love to. I'm coming to Dr. Austin. Thank you so much for being on the call with us, and Mr. Victor. But please let me say something before it skips my mind, and I'll appreciate it if um, I know Dr. Austin is someone who has built a very solid team system. So I would also want him to also respond to this. So let me say something. The things I said does not negate you building a structure and a system that helps it run without you. As a matter of fact, having a CEO that does the heavy lifting in your absence is crucial for helping that system to grow without you. It is the joy and the beauty of every business owner that the business would not be built on them. So, what we have said here today does not mean that because of the case studies we were shared, all right, you want to undermine some of the things that are being said. So, if I hear you clearly, I want to take on something that you said you want to implement. They like to speak to you directly sometimes. Speaking of the team members, maybe including your supervisor. And one of the things you have not done consistently is to ask them if they have communicated first with the COO. Mr. Naho, please, can you confirm that's something you said?
Yes, sir. Yes,
okay,
sir.
Thank you very much. So it means what you sure that they do not go past the chain of command. All right. In fact, if your COO knows that a lot of the things that are being said to you are not coming to his table first, you undermine the system you're already trying to build. You destroy it before it even takes proper root. So please, that which you have said you want to continue to do now is a good decision. Let everyone go back and follow the laid down chain of command, right? But there is a caveat to this. Put the but. And the but here is if the team senses that what is being said to the CEO is not being implemented, only then should they come to you. You need to put that in place, because if you directly just say, from what I'm seeing, the organization is not, in terms of manpower, there are not so many right now. All right. So if you have a system that completely cuts the team away from you because you want to build a structure, you might ultimately shoot your own leg eventually if you now have a CEO that is not, like I described earlier, mature enough to handle the team properly. And I like to suggest that, please, sir, you might not be able to get your COO down to CEO summit, but every now and then, I'm sure you see breakfast management managers retreats that is not even meant for you, the CEO. Please sign them up, because there are a lot of things. I like to put it this way, like we said in the media research, that there are many things you are saying to your team that they also need to hear someone else say, and a little more. In fact, don't forget, it's not what you say alone, it's how you say it. Just maybe someone else needs to say the same thing you have been saying to them in another way. Because I'm saying this because a COO who doesn't have an understanding of how to deal with a team will only deal with the team to the level of their understanding and their knowledge. So they might not have the capacity and the competence to deliver the kind of thing that you are hearing here. So, in addition to what I'm saying, pushing the people back to the COO, but also giving them a caveat that if they sense they need to, they shouldn't feel afraid to come to speak to you or email you or chat you up. Or please don't build a culture that allows them bypass your COO. It will not be good at all. All right. But also let them know,
Thank you,
even when
sir.
they come, let them know this thing you are telling me. If this thing has not landed on your COO's table first or air, I will literally query you. Except it's about the COO they want to talk about. And even after they've come to bring a matter about the COO's performance to you, you still will need to deal with the matter without coming to judge the COO in the presence of the team. That takes a lot of, because you want to build a healthy system. So the final thing I've said is that you now need to train your team. You need to train your managers. You need to train. You need to train. Deliberately train. In fact, don't wait until there's a training. You need to train, right? You need to train. If you don't raise their competence, they will not deliver the value. I hope this has been useful, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rume. Amazing, sir.
We'll chat later, sir. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, sir. God bless you, sir.
Amen. Dr. Austin, sir, I love this Dr. Austin. Someone say, why? Don't worry, I will not talk too much. But Dr. Austin, please, your hands have been raised for a while. Please kindly unmute, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, Rume, hi, thanks. You know, I'm your student now, so
Dr. Austin, Migwo, you need to answer me. Oh, I'm a typical Niger Delta boy, sir. Oh, we can't hear you again, sir. It's like we lost your voice, please. Hello, Dr. Austin, can you hear me, please? Is anybody else hearing him? Please kindly unmute. Somebody should talk to me.
I can hear you, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Okay, good afternoon. Can you hear Dr. Austin's voice?
I can't hear his voice. Let's check whether he's muted.
Is this the same Dr. Chuba I know?
It's Dr. Chuba, yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
one
Dr.
of the
Chuba.
high level people who are involved in,
Dr. Austin is back.
Okay.
Oh, I thought was I away?
Yes,
Are you
we're
not
not
hearing
here.
me?
Lost your voice.
Sorry,
Immediately
sir.
you start speaking, we didn't hear you again.
Oh my God. Okay, sorry about that. I was saying that yeah, I say most strategic intents, which are well crafted, actually fail, not because people don't know what to do, but I think the governance around.
We lost you again.
I'm on the call. I call you back just now.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm saying that governance is one of the key areas where many organizations fail, or where failure begins. And that's the differentiating factor between brilliant ideas and execution.
Yes,
Because ideas are very common. Everybody great ideas all over the place. But the discipline of execution is crafted around how well governed you are. Even communication needs to be governed. You don't just say things because you want to talk, but there should be guidelines to communication.
yes, sir.
What you say, who you say to, and all that. And you know that even when you're talking about idea within an organization, sometimes there's something that calls source credibility. The credibility of your idea, it depends on who you are, how you position yourself in the organization. So people rate you based on that. And in the journey of organizational maturity or leadership maturity, you need to come to a point when you have to manage that yourself, knowing how to, disconnect the idea from the source and take the idea rather than look at the source. But in many times, these things they come together. You see, wrong idea from a credible source. We have more listening than a great idea from everyone, and those are things that play out. Now, generally within an organization, you need to have three clear layers. One is the strategy layer. People who are at that level are market facing. They're the ones who are watching how the market is changing and how those dynamics are affecting competitiveness. You look at competition, you look at customer behavioral changes and all those government policies and all that can affect you. And the second layer is the area that's quite operational and very connected to governance. You're looking inwards, and looking at how you're translating ideas, to reality. And within the governance layer, there are actually three layers like that, or two key layers: the framework design layer, and of course the core governance, which is very close to operations. And all this are going to have to design around what you do, because the core of governance, talks about your process and how things get done and how you guide that process. Because everybody in the business needs to be guided.
Yes, sir.
And if you don't provide that guidance, then there's now ambiguity around solving problems. Because we agree that organizations exist to solve problems. So from the level of strategy to the level of execution, it's a process of solving problems. And that has to be key guidance for people to solve. And your communication at every level has to be different. The way you communicate at the level of strategy, the different way you communicate at the level of management, where at that time you're talking about an idea and then you are now translating it to policies that people can connect with. And then down at level of execution, you are now putting that as SOPs, to-dos, the everyday task and tactical execution of what you are doing. So the guys who are at the front line, who are actually executing, are using a playbook that is connected to strategy. You don't really need to understand the strategy, but you need to understand what to do every day in order to, participate in the problem solving, responsibility of organizations. So I think sometimes the whole struggle that we all struggle in organizations comes from the design. The whole design, the governance,
Fine.
framework itself. And to what extent we identify the objective of governance and then the risk, and how we put this in place to mitigate those risks. And even at the point of execution, at operational level, there are two parts to operations. One is the plan, the other one is the execution. Because you need to have a plan that is connected to the strategy itself. And then you now have the execution that talk about who does what, when, and how, and who's supposed to be consulted, or who's supposed to be informed, or who's supposed to be responsible, or to be held accountable, and what your daily deliverables are, your weekly deliverables, and all that. So until you break down the strategy to daily actionable, task, it becomes a bit difficult for you to know when you fail, when things go wrong. So I think that governance is very key, and governance is about everything that you do, and the controls that guide you to make sure that you get it right. So that when things go wrong, you can know where things went wrong. The biggest challenge we have is this internal VUCA, which people talk about VUCA, which is volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. There's the internal VUCA where within an organization, the volatility, the speed at which things change and people are not carried along, sometimes can create a lot of confusion. And also it creates some kind of uncertainty, where people can't even predict tomorrow. Predictability becomes a problem. And there's no clarity around issues, and because of the interconnected nature of human beings, even in the current world, usually the complexities create additional confusion, when it comes to executing a task. And the responsibility of organizations is to provide clarity, to provide shared vision, to ensure understanding, and also make sure that there's no ambiguity around what people are doing. And I think that at every level, when it comes to decision making, people must know their own role when it comes to deciding issues. To what extent can they decide? And that is when the delegation of authority comes in. It must come down from the CEO desk down to the front line, so that the CEO or the senior management does not get bothered with little things. Everybody must have his own share of what he can decide about, and you are given the freedom to make decisions in a way that the price of a mistake is not too heavy. So at the front line, you can take decisions that will not cost the organization anything material. But as you mature through the ladder, you get to a point when you as a CEO, you make a mistake. The price is usually very heavy. And so at that level, you come with a lot of experience, that ensures that. And again, the CEO is as good as his reports. So you must surround yourself with people who will help you to make less mistakes. The CFO, the CEO, and all that. And so engaging your team regularly before you execute, before you give the order for things to start, going down the chain, it's so important so that your ideas are well filtered and well discussed and well, cross-fertilized. So the chances of a mistake have become very slim because the price of it is usually very high. So generally, I think communication is very important. It needs to be governed clearly. And then, of course, decision making is what you do every day. We take decisions every day about our personal life, about everything every day. And how well skilled we are in taking decisions is what is very important. And therefore, learning how to take decisions is very important because we pay a price for everything that we do. Either we get a positive or a negative. Every day we take decisions. And you and I know that even when you take buying decisions, sometimes you regret buying something that you don't need. So it means that the quality and the process of decision making has to be well governed, both at individual level and organizational level, so that the chances that you make a mistake or tell the mistake is costly are brought back to a minimum. That is the bit I have to contribute. Thank you.
Wow, Doctor, thank you so much. Now, when I said I love Dr. Austin, you can tell why now. So let me leave it there. Doctor, this was very, very, very well crafted. And in fact, I took one keynote down, and I don't take that for granted. Thank you for contributing this immensely to us. I'm very grateful. I want to trust that everyone on this board has, benefited immensely one way or the other from what has been shared here today. But before we go, I'm just going to say that at some point in the month of July, I have, Tim and I have a, a much deeper conversation. Many years ago, we used to run certain trainings around communication, delivery, presentation, and so on and so forth. And for a while, we've not done anything around that because there were other things to focus on. But I think what inspired this again is that lately I began to see how someone will reach out and say, I have this presentation, please help me, guide me, and all of that. I have this speech to make. Yes, I can't count how many executives I've had to, in the last couple of years, prepare them for a speech they want to go and deliver, outside of the organization and sometimes inside. But we've taken this presentation beyond just effective presentation and all of that, and we've connected it to leadership mastery and all that it does within our organization and without. So we have this training that we have sometime later in the month, and I want to. It's not for everybody. Actually, it's not at all. There are loads of materials that I've had over the years on this public speaking things. In fact, if you want them for free, I could literally hand them over to you. But this is not that kind of training. So please kindly feel free. Oh, okay. Am I seeing a hand up?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Frederick. Okay, please quickly do this so that we can wrap up.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you for adding me to this meeting. I just wanted to share my thoughts and some of my takeaways, And, you mentioned the strategies died between decision and execution. That really got me thinking as well. And some of my experience here for my wife and I living in Europe, in Austria too, I'm just so glad, I've been a part of this because earlier today when I was walking, I was listening to some teaching also on vision. You talked about vision, as well. And the more you communicate your vision, the better for you and for your organization, And being in this meeting just confirmed what I was listening to as well. And for our own experience here, some of the things I feel that also affect communication is also, like you mentioned, language and culture. Because we've also worked, though my wife and I, we have a couple of businesses we manage both in Nigeria, and we also have our non-governmental organization. But working here in Europe, we see that communication, most times language and culture also affect communication and also mindsets. A lot of people we've worked with, they're just comfortable at the level. And in an organization where you have the boss up there and you have your direct manager or boss, sometimes they are also threatened. By the time you are in a meeting and you're supposed to share your ideas, some of them, they feel this person is doing too much, so, and also culture as well, because and we also have a verbal and non-verbal communication. Also culture in the sense that the way they understand things, like typical of us, maybe you are working with somebody in the office and probably the person hits his leg on the chair and you say sorry. It's not normal here that like you don't have to say sorry. You're not the cause of it. And I remember the experience my wife shared with me when he was working in an office, and it's an international organization. They speak English there, but they still have this cultural issue. And the boss will say, Benedicta, can you please do this? And to our own understanding, he said, okay, my boss is giving me option either to do it the way she wants or do my own way. But in her own interpretation, he's telling her, do this thing. This is what I want you to do.
The please is just me being polite, but I need you to get it done.
Just be polite, So I think communication here, culture, mindset, a lot of people, a number of them here, they just feel comfortable. Of recent, we're even having an issue right now, even in my wife's office. She's the kind of person that likes reaching out for more. At some point, they feel she's doing too much, both with the body language and everything. So I think it's something, maybe you will help us, especially living in a country, a German-speaking country. Right. And the last speaker, Doctor mentioned about governance of communication, and that is also something I'm also interested in. Thank you so much for the time, sir.
You're very, very welcome. And thank you so much. I have followed your journey from Nigeria and around the world, you and your wife, and grateful for the fact that you've not been limited by the things you've seen.
Daniel.
Are you serious? All right. So I am very, very glad that you're making the kind of progress that you're making, and most definitely aware of the fact that there's much more. So in closing, I would love to just present this. All right. You look on the screen, you can see the date is not far away. It's on the 23rd. We're going more intensive on this conversation. It's a 4-hour training. However, I just want to add that there might be an extra day to this. I said there might be an extra day to this because we're going to have, for those who are signed up for the class, we're going to have some presentations that we need to do, verbal presentations that we need to do outside of the class itself. So yes, this is something you might see. It's not everywhere, but you're going to see it in a couple of days. Please understand that for those on this call, please, within the next 72 hours, the early birds are still available. But if you were signing up for more than one person, we would have a little bit of discounts done for you. Now, this is very much targeted at organizations. If you're an individual on this call and you want to do this, all right, very much so, you're welcome. But please, let me plead, like I said earlier, beyond just the CEO, the MD, all right, there are layers of leadership that is crucial for carrying the message, all right, in a very, very structured manner. And that is the cadre we're most likely targeting. And if you're an SME, yeah, this is crucial for you. A much larger organization might need to send the middle level team members to also sign up for this. So I want to leave this here and hope that we can respond to this as quickly as possible. The workstation is open for conversations after now. Now, I hope this has been quite useful for us, believe me. And we look forward to taking this conversation even deeper than we've already had it already. So thank you for the time, everyone. Thank you for taking our time this afternoon to join us from wherever you are in the world. We don't take you for granted. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to having you for the intensive session of this training. God bless you. Bye. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Oh, Dr. Austin, your hand is still up, or is it from earlier?
It's the earlier one, sorry.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Dr. Shuba, thanks for the thumbs up. Thank you.
Yeah.
Talk to everyone
You're
later.
welcome.
Bye.
Goodbye, sir.